Hello, everybody. My name is Taylor Stanley. I'm the Family Engagement Specialist for DC Public Schools, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today. Day 2 of virtual learning, right? And I'm hoping that things went as smoothly as they could, considering it's been an unusual year, and so it makes sense that yesterday would have been an even more unusual way to start school. And we know that each day comes with a unique set of challenges, a unique set of circumstances. But I know that as families with children in special education, you understand that you take challenges every day as they come, the unique set of challenges, the unique needs of your child. And so I'm really happy here to be here with you all today for learning how to navigate the Individualized Education Program, IEP process this year. So to start off, we want to give you a quick rundown of upcoming workshops. On the 3rd, on Thursday, we have English Learning Family Guide to Partnering with Pre-K Teachers. And so this is in Spanish, which is really exciting. On the 10th, experience restorative practices with your family. On the 15th, what will attendance look like for school year 2021? And so I encourage you all to join that one. And then also for my high school families, on the 17th, we have a workshop all about high school grading, graduation, and supports. And so we'd love to see you there. Feel free to sign up at bit.ly/DCPS Parent U RSVP. And that's all lowercase. Now, for those of you who like to use subtitles, I like to use subtitles and captions when I'm watching things. We have those available in Spanish, French, Chinese, and Vietnamese. And so if you look for the gear icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the video player, then select captions and subtitles, and then choose the language from the list of captions, you'll be able to follow along using our captions. This is also Microsoft Teams. So what that looks like is we don't get to see your faces, we don't get to hear your voices, but we get to use the Q&A feature to engage with you all. One thing that we want to keep in mind is that it is a moderated Q&A. So we're not able to, we're not going to be able to post every single question, every single comment that folks might have, especially if, there are some repeat questions. But we do want to make sure that you do feel empowered to ask questions, share insights that you might have. And then if there are questions that you'd like the answer to, please use the thumbs up, the upvote feature to be able to let us know that this is a question that you'd really like the answer to. We also want to say that this allows you to also ask questions that you might want to be anonymous. And so you can use the anonymous feature. We won't hold it against you. We want to make sure that you feel safe in asking questions. So one of the things that we ask of you is that you assume best intentions, you go hard on ideas and not on people, and then you accept non-closure. I know that for me, 2020 has been a year where I'm just kind of having to, give myself and others some grace in how we adjust and make changes. So we're asking the same as we step into the parent university space. But you're not here to hear me talk. You're here to hear Kerri Larkin, who's the W Chief for Specialized Instruction, and she will be walking you through the IEP process for this year. And so I'll be checking in later to be able to moderate some questions and ask some of the questions that you all have. Oh, Kerri, you're on mute.
I think I am off mute now. Thank you so much, parents, for joining us today. I know you are probably as exhausted as I am after day 2 of online learning, and I hope you had some great success with your students and your technology at home. Very briefly, my name is Kerri Larkin. I'm the Deputy Chief of Specialized Instruction for DCPS. This is 20 plus years for me in the DC public school system, and I started as a teacher at Cardozo High School and then Anacostia High School, where I mostly taught 9th grade. My team is with me today. In the background, Sandy Watson is the director of our monitoring and school support team, which supports schools in ensuring that IDEA is upheld in every building for you and your children. And Regina Grimmett, who is in charge of all related services for DCPS in collaboration with our mental health team. They're both exceedingly expert, experienced, loving leaders for DCPS, and they will be answering questions in the background. Just a little bit of insight about what my team and I do for DC Public Schools. We work to increase access to the general education curriculum for your students in alignment with IDEA. We work to remove obstacles to their inclusion and ensure that they can participate as meaningfully as possible in the general education curriculum. And we work to address disproportionality. You know on this call that there are components of this special education system that disproportionately negatively impact African American children in particular. And we use our data to expose those disproportional experiences and reduce or eliminate them. That is something that we name and we care a great deal about. So I welcome you into this space today, and I look forward to your challenging questions. Everything we do in DCPS is grounded in our values. The values for virtual instruction are very similar to our values to brick and mortar school. One is a focus on equity in special education. That includes not only all of IDEA, but technology access, and ensuring that each child has the device that they need to participate in online school. In special education, excellence looks like more educational opportunities in the curriculum, in interventions and in resources for teachers to bring to your children at home. We spent a great deal of time this summer building out the curriculum and the Canvas course companions so that your children are working in alignment with their non-disabled peers. Authentic learning looks a lot like closing gaps. So ensuring that our related service providers have the same access to curriculum that teachers do. So children are doing related services that align to their daily lessons, align to things that are developmentally appropriate for them to be experiencing and helping out at home. So there's authentic application to the skills that they're learning, whether those skills are in ELA and math or OT and PT. And then we are taking a holistic approach to instruction, and I can't emphasize enough our sincerity to this approach. Holistic instruction means we stop during the day for brain breaks, movement, snacks, stretching, family time, rest. Kids, like adults, cannot just sit on the computer and a whole group instruction all day long, and we know this. And we heard a lot from families about the challenges that our students in particular faced engaging long periods of time in the online instruction. So we work to create schedules that were more conducive to students with special needs learning at home. And we look to that same holistic approach for families. And our commitment to you has not changed. We believe that all students, regardless of their background or circumstance, can achieve at the highest possible levels. And we are committed to ensuring that our families of students with disabilities have clear communication from us regarding the processes, their kiddos' progress, and the services available to them in DCPS. There's so much about special education that, despite the virtual environment, has not changed. IDEA is a federal law. Federal law does not stop because of a health crisis, and we are still working with all of the pillars of IDEA. So instruction and student learning begins in the general education curriculum with as much access to grade level content as appropriate for each of your children. The IEP remains the legal document of record, the document to which we are beholden, and that is what each child needs regardless of where we go to school. The IEP process is the same process, and we will get into more detail about what does and does not change about that process during virtual learning. You will still receive quarterly progress reports and increased communication from teachers and related service providers. And like instruction, all related services will be virtual until we are able to be in a brick and mortar space together. So as we get into our conversation today, I want to name that in special education, we tend to speak in alphabet soup. We have acronyms for everything. I encourage you to stop and ask if anybody on the call, myself, or in any answers, we use an acronym that you don't know or that is unfamiliar. These are some of the acronyms that we use most frequently. And when we had our previous parent university, there were some questions. So SPED is simply an acronym for special education, which is the system we're here to discuss. Specially designed instruction and related services provided at no cost to meet the unique needs of students with disabilities in public schools. IDEA is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. It's the federal law that ensures the rights of students and their families, eligible students with disabilities. The IEP is an Individualized Education Program. If your child has been diagnosed as a child with a disability, you have an IEP and you've been in this process with us for a while. An acronym that may be new to some of you is the IDLP, the Individualized Distance Learning Plan. We will talk more about this later in the presentation. It's a document that outlines how the IEP will be implemented during virtual learning. The IEP is still the legal document of record. And RSP is a related service provider. That could be a speech language pathologist, an occupational therapist, a physical therapist, lots and lots of acronyms. So please don't hesitate to call any of us out if we are speaking in alphabet soup. We're going to talk about what is new this fall and what we heard in the spring from families and from teachers alike. Thank you, Taylor. So over the course of the spring and the summer, we gathered tons of feedback from families, from teachers, from paraprofessionals. The thing we heard loudest was parents need more support at home. They need support working with their children, navigating technology, accessing the various platforms, and understanding the relationships between all the pieces of their child's IEP. None of us asked to be homeschoolers, and here we are. And we heard loud and clear that our families need more help. Part of that help was better understanding what the IEP looks like in a virtual environment, and that's the Individualized Distance Learning Plan that we will talk about later. Virtual assessments will be the new norm for DCPS while we are in this health crisis. We will talk about what the virtual assessments process is going to look like and the training that we've done over the summer to ensure our providers are ready, and telehealth consent forms that are needed in order for us to provide virtual services to each of your children. So let's get into the meat of the presentation, which we're excited to share with you today, and really looking forward to your questions so that this can be a good use of everybody's time, and hopefully you leave with what you need to take your own next steps with your child and your school. So let's look at the Individualized Education Plan and eligibility process this year. The IEP process itself does not change. The process initiates with a referral that can be from a parent or a teacher. It can be from a third party like a pediatrician or a social worker. It can be verbal. It does not have to be in writing, but a parent or someone who knows the child well needs to make clear to the school, I suspect this child has a disability and needs to be evaluated. And then that is the point at which we come to you for consent. The system has 30 days to gain your consent to evaluate your child, but it doesn't have to take 30 days. If you agree and give us consent on day 2, that starts the next timeline, which is the 60 days we have to evaluate children. The evaluation process can look like formal assessments, analysis of existing data, which could be schoolwork or projects, interviews with parents and teachers and screeners. And that's a 60-day process to make sure that it is thorough, to make sure that we have time to not only administer assessments, but compile them and analyze them and share them with the team. And then an eligibility determination will be made. If a child is determined eligible as a child with a disability, then the team has 30 days to create that child's individualized education plan, the Individualized Education Program. So the total process for that is 90 days. It does not need to take 90 days. That's the longest it can possibly take. Frequently can take less if depending on your child and your child's individual needs. So in terms of virtual learning and our health crisis, nothing about the IEP process and the timeline has changed. Something that has changed is that IEP meetings now need to be virtual. So when we collaborate to look at data, to look at assessments, to look at all of the evaluations of a child and make a determination, those meetings will be entirely virtual. So you would expect the school to contact you and you will determine the right date and time for the team to meet, and you will receive written invitation to that meeting because you are a valued partner, of course, in that decision making. You would receive a draft of all of the documents that would be reviewed at that meeting. The law, the DCMR, is 5 days before the meeting, and DCPS, we recommend 10 days before the meeting, 10 calendar days, so that you have time not only to receive, but to review and try to understand those assessments. Some of them are complicated. There's a lot of dense language, so you would want to review those and come to the meeting with questions and concerns. Teams is where we hold our meetings. We don't hold Zoom meetings. There is more privacy on the team sites, and that's the site that DCPS has adopted for our virtual meetings. And then again, you will receive all documentation at the conclusion of that meeting. The collaboration piece is something we are working to improve always, but in particular as families are navigating a virtual space. The language line and interpretation services remain available. Parents indicate in Aspen if they have these needs, and so frequently we are able to plan ahead of time, but that is something we would always want to know so that you are active participants. Teams has built-in accommodations that can be provided as needed to any parent who may need assistance in navigating the documentation or the meeting itself. And then you have options as well. You don't have to come to a Microsoft Teams meeting. You could participate via phone or be part of the video conference. There are still some options remaining in the virtual space for you to choose a medium that's more comfortable for you. And again, I want to reiterate, you are a valued member of the IEP team. You know your child best. You are sitting in a room full of people who are expert in their discipline, which could be instruction, which could be speech language pathology, or it could be mental health, but you are an expert in your child. And you're sitting with a table or a virtual table of people who care a lot about your child and who know different things than you know. And we need your insights, we need your questions, we need your observations. You are a valued partner in this process, and we all have lots of questions to bring. So we welcome your questions and concerns, and we welcome your hopes and dreams for your child. Parents are as unique and diverse as their children are, and they have unique and diverse ways of navigating what it means to be the parent of a child with a disability. We follow the IDEA, which requires us to look to the least restrictive environment for a child to receive their supports and services, and then we navigate with you what is right for your child from there. The last piece of the IEP process for children who have not yet been determined eligible is the eligibility itself and the eligibility determination. So in order to determine a child eligible as a child with a disability, there need to be a variety of assessments, and the related service providers, when we first shifted in the spring, did not conduct virtual assessments. Our related service providers spent the spring and the summer and will continue to learn in the fall what it means to provide virtual assessments that are rich and meaningful and yield data that is helpful for us in making meaningful determinations for children. We recognize that there is a backlog of assessments because we didn't have the training and the expertise we needed in the spring to conduct every assessment that children needed. So we will spend this fall addressing the backlog of assessments. We know that some parents are waiting to hear from providers so that we can continue to make progress on a child's eligibility. And then we will be able to make those determinations and develop IEPs as appropriate. I think that brings us to our first place to stop. So the first portion of this discussion and meeting today is on the IEP process itself in a virtual space. The second portion will deal much more directly with related services and what they will look like. I know that Sandy and Regina in the background have been able to answer lots of questions and concerns, and I'm sure in answering them, patterns of questions and concerns are emerging. So I look forward to hearing from the moderator, Taylor, some of the questions and concerns that you have raised.
Yeah, and I actually really love the way you said that families are experts in their children, and that DCPS staff are experts in their field. And so I love the way that you put those two ideas together. And so yes, absolutely. One of the questions that we had was about language access. We had a couple of questions about those. For example, would the initial notification or email be in the family's home language as well as the document itself?
Yeah, the initial email should come in the family's home language. We do translate into home language the vital documents. The documents can be incredibly dense and full of very education specific language. So we work to ensure that families have the vital documents they need per the Language Access Act to bring their questions and concerns and plans for the IEP for their child.
Great. And you touched on this as well. How will we make up sessions from the last school year?
That's a great question. And from a large perspective, like a very grand scale perspective, not an individual child perspective, I think when we come back to school, the idea is that we will, for all children, including children with disabilities, assess the level of learning loss and then mitigate the loss before we start planning. We know children have lost. Children have lost instructional time and related service time. So our first goal is to assess and determine where children are relative to where we would hope they would be at the beginning of the school year, give them time to remediate, catch up, teach new skills, new content while addressing that gap, and then start talking about what we might need to make up. We definitely want to assess and serve immediately, and then make plans for how to mitigate loss.
And the questions are coming in, but I just want to ask one more. Mm-hmm. And this is a more technical question. For families who may not be able to print out the forms and physically sign them, is there a way for them to e-sign them? What is the procedure?
No, that's a great question, and we'll actually talk about that a little bit in the next section. It's a great segue to the related service section because we will be talking about the telehealth form and the importance of that form, because that's the consent to provide teletherapy. And maybe this is a good segue into related services, but I also just want to name that I know parents often have very specific questions about their own child or their particular related service that may not be appropriate for a really large meeting of this size or this scope, but that the related service providers and teachers should be able to answer those questions about your child. And if for any reason they can't, then you just email any one of us and we'll work with you.
Oh, and I wanted to follow up with one more question.
Sure.
If your student is already has an IEP, mm-hmm. How long is it valid, or are students, do they need to be reassessed annually?
Sure. The IEP is updated at least annually. Parents can request an update to the IEP at any time, but typically, there's not a lot of typical in special ed, but it's an annual event to update the IEP. And then triannually, every 3 years, we reassess. Children change, I mean, anybody who's had a child knows an infant doesn't look too much like a 3-year-old, and a 3-year-old doesn't look too much like a 6-year-old. Children evolve and change. Some things don't change, and some things really do evolve, and needs become more or less over time. So that reevaluation piece is integral to understanding how a child's needs grow and change over the course of their development.
Great, thanks, Kerri.
Sure. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about related services and assessments in a virtual environment. And I know there will be lots of questions about this that both Sandy and Regina can handle in the background, and I'm going to show you the big picture of related services in DCPS. As I mentioned earlier, students with IEPs will have individualized distance learning plans by September 30th. These are developed by related service providers and teachers and then shared with parents for parent input. The IEP is the legal document. So generally speaking, we don't want to change the IEP to fit virtual learning because we want kids back in brick and mortar school as soon as possible, as soon as we are able. And who that child is the same child, whether they are in brick and mortar or virtual school. But we know that the delivery of that IEP changes in a virtual model, and we need to be more clear and forthcoming about what it looks like to establish a weekly routine for IEP implementation in a virtual space. And that is the purpose of the individualized distance learning plans that we are requiring this school year for children with IEPs. Some of you who may have joined us for the previous Parent University for children, for parents of children with IEPs, saw some of these slides. The individualized distance learning plan is created with the relevant stakeholders. So that includes related service providers, teachers, sometimes with the older students, it would include students and parents. And it's some of the strategies and supports and resources that may look different in a virtual space than they would in a brick and mortar space, and a little more clarity about what it looks like if school is essentially running 4 days a week instead of 5. So then what do I expect in terms of my related services and my instruction? It does not replace the IEP. It does not require an entire team meeting, and it is not necessarily an ongoing requirement. We believe we can talk about this and establish a routine and expectations with families in the fall, and that will set us up for success in virtual learning, whatever component of virtual learning the child has access to during this school year. We hope to return to brick and mortar as soon as we are able. The next couple of slides will just give you an image of what the distance learning plan looks like. There is a cover page. This is a page that would outline the child's instructional goals. What is the current goal? It wouldn't change. What are some remote resources that may be available to teachers and parents that are different than what we would utilize in a brick and mortar space? And with what frequency would a parent expect a child to receive this level of support and service from their special education teacher? The next page we did not share during the instructional parent university, and that's the related service page. This goes into detail depending on your child's IEP and which service they receive or services they receive. But the related service provider will pre-populate some of this with what to expect in a virtual space. So if your child receives speech therapy, they will be receiving some degree of teletherapy, very likely parent consultation. They may be doing other. Other could be a teacher consultation, so it could be delivered in a co-teaching setting with a classroom teacher. It could be with another related service provider. So sometimes providers collaborate with one another. So that's the method for delivery. The mode is how is the child going to receive the service? Is it in an individual setting or a small group setting? Is it a co-taught setting? Is it an asynchronous experience? There are different modalities that providers can leverage in order to ensure that children have the services and supports they need. And then the frequency is at what interval. The distance learning plans are largely calculated on a monthly basis, so that we can ensure we have that we are meeting the IEP goals and the providers are available, and then duration is likely to be in minutes. The telehealth consent form would need to be signed when we have the conversation with families about the individualized distance learning plan. This is crucial to our ability to serve your child in a virtual space. So Taylor asked earlier, well, okay, but we're not at a table, so how do we sign this? You can provide verbal consent. For telehealth, you can type your name into a document. We may be able to accept an email, but you are able to provide us verbal consent, and we can make note of that verbal consent as part of your participation in the meeting. Virtual assessment has been a learning curve for our related service providers. And something they've worked incredibly hard on all summer in order to reach children who need assessments, either through the backlog or through new child find options or triennials that we just discussed. Special education assessments will be entirely remote for certainly the beginning of this school year. And perhaps into the brick and mortar space. They include the parent and the teacher. These are interviews with parents. They include observations of the child in a virtual setting, data collection that can look like teacher logs, student work. There's lots of ways that we can still meaningfully assess students in a virtual and distance model, and we will continue to do that to include discipline-specific assessments. So students have lots of related services. There's lots of options. This just depends entirely on what your child needs from us to better access the general education curriculum. What you're looking at right here are a list of services that may or may not be on your child's IEP: audiology, behavior support, occupational therapy, orientation and mobility, physical therapy, and speech language pathology. Those are the kinds of related services that are offered to students with IEPs. And this goes into a little bit more detail about what we were just discussing on the distance learning plan. What is the method of delivery and what is the platform on which this could be delivered? So related services are not necessarily only one-to-one. Sometimes they're one-to-one. Sometimes a small group of children can be pulled in together. Some of you may have children who are in our self-contained programs, and sometimes there are groups, a group of 2 or 3 kids who are have a similar need in that, and the related service provider can pull them in a small group, and it becomes just part of the instructional landscape of the classroom. Our related service providers pushed into online classes in the spring and during ESY, and actually did some co-teaching with special educators and paraprofessionals to embed the related service into the content. That gets a little bit back to the authentic learning that we want children to experience, which is connections between their life at home with you, the content they're learning at school, and these services that help support their access to instruction. Sometimes the related service providers co-teach and they pair up to build connections between speech and OT. Or PT and behavior. And sometimes student frustration comes out as behavior, and we can reduce that by working together. Asynchronous learning is a term I think we all learned how to master in the spring. That's talking about recorded lessons that children can access when it's convenient for the family. So we heard a lot that more live instruction was necessary to engage kids with their peers and their teachers. So there's more access to live instruction, but we also know that especially children with IEPs really struggle to maintain their engagement online. It's very challenging to hold attention online, and that's not always manageable for families who may have other children at home and are also working from home. So the asynchronous learning affords a little more flexibility to kids and families who need to pace their day a little bit differently than perhaps the school calendar allows, or perhaps that the live instruction would allow. Some other consultation models that we sort of discussed with the IDLP is a teacher consultation or a parent consultation. Consultation is really how to adapt or create appropriate instructional materials that help the teacher learn more about what the provider is doing, so that the teacher can also be a conduit for related service delivery, and strategies that the teacher might incorporate not only for kiddos with IEPs, but other kids who might be facing some sort of challenge or obstacle, and then it becomes part of the class routine. With parents, we always want to talk about ways that you could apply a particular strategy that the related service provider is teaching at home in really intuitive ways. What folding socks, setting the table, helping your younger brother or sister, activities that are intuitive to family life at home, and how related services show up in some of those day-to-day activities, and then you can practice those with your children. Physical therapy will be delivered entirely in consultation this year. Physical therapy is the only therapy that we are unable to provide in a virtual model because by its definition, it requires contact. It requires contact between an adult and a child that we are unable to provide in this with the health guidance right now. So IEP consultative services for physical therapy looks like recorded videos, exercise sheets to practice movement, video conferences. The PTs can push into the virtual classroom and talk to teachers about ways to incorporate elements of PT or perhaps co-treatment with other related service providers. PT is the only service that will be entirely consultative for the beginning of the school year. I know that's so much information to take in, and that's so much information about almost every related service that is provided in DCPS. The odds are very good that your child receives maybe one or two of these services. Some of your children may receive all or most of these services. But I definitely look forward to your questions at this time and hearing what sort of themes or patterns are emerging from the chat.
Yeah, so we have a couple of popular questions. And this has to do with like the sped hours or minutes. And so will they be the same in the virtual classroom as they were in person?
So in terms of instruction, there are not the same number of hours in the school day. So there's not a one-to-one correspondence between the IEP in a brick and mortar space and the IEP in a virtual space. And the purpose of the distance learning plan is to be more clear about what the execution of the IEP looks like. So how many minutes or hours a week should a family expect for specialized instruction or for speech or for OT and PT? I think we would not expect a one-to-one correspondence because school is not functioning at that capacity yet, but it should be proportional to what school is. And then we make the determination from there.
Great. And then another popular question, and this is where the parent is as an advocate, really appears, is that what should a parent do if they feel like the IEP is not being serviced in the virtual environment?
That is a great question, and I'm sure so many parents who came to be with us today have so many concerns for their children. Let me take a stab at the answer, and then you tell me if this is sort of getting at your concern. I think there's a difference between the experience of saying, gosh, like virtual learning does not work very well for my child. Because there's nothing we can do about that right now. Virtual learning is the only option we have. I think we all agree that our students in particular are best served in a brick and mortar space with the experts around them who understand who they are and what they do well and what they need from us, and we want to bring them back as soon as possible. I think what we want to encourage is collaboration, active vocal collaboration with the teacher, with the providers, with the school. If something's not working, let's figure out what could make it work. It's going to take a little time to adjust. It's going to take a little time to practice navigating, Canvas and Teams and the new platforms. It's exhausting, I know. I felt hit by a truck yesterday trying to help my two middle schoolers do online school every day, all day. So tired by the end of the day, but we know we need to practice and get into the routine of it. And then we kind of need to figure out, okay, well, could we make some small adjustments that might work for my child? Like, my child can only pay attention for 10 or 15 minutes. So by then, my child needs to get up and move around. That's something that I believe teachers and parents can work out together. If your child were in school, we would just create a system to say, okay, this is when your child's going to take a walk here or take a walk there or have a job in the class that allows them to move and then come back to the instruction. We can build out some of the asynchronous opportunities so that all the learning is in small bursts. Now, that's kind of the virtual learning adjustment. If you believe that you have this IEP for your child and that you are working with someone who is not doing what they committed to do on the individualized distance learning plan, then the place to start would be the school, the teacher, the LEA representative designee at the school to say, you know, I am concerned that I haven't received this, or that somebody said this, but we're getting that, and there's a discrepancy there, and I am unhappy. I mean, as the parent, you have a voice, and you have due process rights, and you can say, I want to meet with the team. But I would caution all of us to let the adjustment happen. Give everyone a little bit of time to learn develop these new muscles essentially, and learn these new routines, because the healing is going to take place in the instruction and in the engagement, and that's where we want kids with their teachers and their classmates and their providers as much as possible.
Awesome. And you touched a little bit on this. Mm-hmm. So, but if virtual video sessions pose a challenge for certain children, mm-hmm. because of their disability, mm-hmm. Are there any other options for them?
Well, I would say that, again, I would want to give kids and parents a chance to see what is new in the instructional landscape this year, because we as a district either created or invested in a great deal more platforms that are more accessible, have more accessibility features, are more engaging for all kinds of learners. It will be different than the spring. I know many of us bring like the same hurt, in some ways even like trauma, a sense of overwhelmingness from the spring into this fall, and think, gosh, I can't do that again. And I do want to assure you with confidence that there is more and better stuff for your children to do in terms of the schedule, in terms of the content, in terms of the accommodations and modifications and the services. We have been tireless this summer in trying to make this a rich, rewarding, and nurturing space for your child. So please give it a chance, and please give kids the opportunity to adapt a little bit. And then I would say, you know, work with your teachers, and also we on the central office level are working to create more inroads for both teachers and parents to have a much more dynamic feedback loop. Because I'm quite sure on this call, we have kids who love being online and hate being online. We have kids who are super tech savvy and kids who just turn away. You know, so there's never going to be one way to do this right. There's going to be really good options for all the different learners that we have. So I think part of that is going to be all of us remaining engaged in the process, giving it time to work, getting the feedback to the teachers, getting feedback to us about what is and isn't working, so that we can increase options, and help people master some of the accessibility features, because a lot of that is really built into the technology. And there is a learning curve, because I'm on that curve all the time with you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kerri. Yeah, no, it's a lot to take in. And so again, we talked about grace in the beginning. So another question that popped up, and I know that we want to keep moving. Another question that popped up is about the small groups. Families, you know, they want to make sure that their privacy will be protected. And so what does that look like for families?
I'm not entirely sure I understand the question correctly. What I can tell you is that there are opportunities in the day for teachers to provide whole group instruction where all the kids are in the virtual classroom at the same time. And then there are breakout spaces where smaller groups of kids are working together. They may be with a teacher or a related service provider. They might be with a paraprofessional or a co-teacher, but there are breakout spaces. And then there's time for individual work, which may be on or offline. So I think there is, we are kind of in each other's homes to a certain degree during any amount of live instruction. And I know that the district is working on what those like privacy parameters and guardrails are for kids and families, particularly as it relates to one-on-one instruction between any adult and any child, or like certain grade levels. So I believe that guidance is being finalized and is forthcoming.
Great, thanks, Kerri. I think that and then no, here's another question.
Okay.
That families have asked about. Will students receive supplies like physical manipulatives to help with their education instead of using virtual? How does that work?
Teachers received the same cards that they get at the beginning of the school year for classroom supplies. So supplies that are coming home from schools and not the district.
That's very good to know. Thank you, Kerri. I know that we have a couple of slides left, and so we can go through those, and then if we see more questions pop up, we can answer those before we wrap up.
Sure. Sure. So we are in day 2. It feels like day 220 sometimes, I know, but we are day 2 of virtual school for 2021. So these next 2 weeks, this first month of school, is setting up all of the systems and structures that we hope will support your child and your family as we acclimate to online school. So first is collaboration with teachers and parents, focused on relationship building and technologies. This first week of school is not a lot of new learning. It's not a lot of content. It's not even assessment yet. It's helping kids get to know their teacher in a virtual environment, helping them get to know their classmates, having those relationships feel safe and trusting and hopefully joyful. That kids can bring their personalities and their hopes and their interests into the classroom, and really making meaningful use of that time to get used to the technology, to make mistakes, to laugh at those mistakes, to get frustrated and work through it together. The first week and 2 of school is really going to be about creating a safe and intuitive and natural environment. No later than the 4th of September, you will receive an introduction letter from your child's related service provider that will have contact information. So if you have more specific questions, you will be developing a collaborative relationship with that person and setting up a schedule for your child. And then all of that will be finalized in the individualized distance learning plan. So that may be led by either your child's case manager or your child's teacher. That process will start around mid-September so that it is finalized by the end of September. To be clear, that does not mean that we are waiting to do anything until the end of September. Your child's IEP is still your child's IEP, but in order for every child in DCPS to have an individualized distance learning plan, we need sort of a block of space to coordinate with related service providers, general education teachers, parents, special educators, to bring all of that together into a plan that works for each child, share the plan with parents, ensure it is the right plan, and finalize it. So all of that work will be happening in the first couple of weeks of school, and that will be the plan that helps us sort of translate IEP in a brick and mortar space to IEP in a virtual space. And then there's so many resources. I know it can be quite overwhelming, but 2 that I would like to highlight for you today. One is a new resource hub from OSSE, the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, and this is specific to families of students with IEPs. It is a resource hub for what to expect this year. Information to support your child, to support you, how to navigate distance learning at home, connect with other parents. This is OSSE's website that is specific to you as parents of students with IEPs. And then in the Division of Specialized Instruction, we have an annual special education programs and resources guide for families. Ton of family feedback on this document. It's laid out almost entirely as questions. What does this mean? When does this happen? How do I navigate this? And then it's very process oriented with graphics and timelines to help you to navigate what can be really complex and overwhelming. But it's a helpful resource. There's gorgeous pictures of your beautiful kids in there and lots of questions that people ask us over time, answered in language that is pretty clear and direct, and hopefully not so much education jargon and acronym soup. Both of those are available online.
Thanks, Kerri. So I want to go back to asking questions because I know that we have about 10 minutes left. So I want to give around 5 more minutes for questions. Mm-hmm. And you've been doing great. So for families who are new to DCPS or who are new to the IEP process, who should they reach out to begin that process?
So if your child already has an IEP and you are new to us, then your first point of contact we always recommend is the school. Your child's teacher is the other person who's going to get to know your child best by the end of the school year, or either the principal or the LEA representative designee at that school can help you navigate the process. It's very likely if you have come to us from another state or another jurisdiction that you would participate in a 30-day review of your child's IEP with their new IEP team in DCPS, and that would be a virtual meeting to help us better understand how DCPS will implement your child's IEP. If you're from somewhere else. If you are here in DCPS, but you are new to this process, or you're somewhere in the eligibility process, or very new to the special education system, the starting place would still be your child's special education teacher. They're the ones who know the system the best, who know the world of special education instruction and service delivery, and can help navigate the process. We have lots of wonderful parents and lots of wonderful parent resources in schools to help connect to other parents. We used to have a special education parent advisory panel. Now DCPS has one panel, but we will be looking for other ways to connect parents to other parents and have other parent universities over the course of the year so that you can be connected to other parents of children with IEPs.
Thanks, Kerri. There was, let me scroll down because I saw some more recent upvotes. This was a question, and I want to give kudos to the families because you all are using language where this is expert level language, and the fact that you all are relaying these back to us with such ease is really a testament to your expertise in your child as an advocate. And so, to be quite frank, there are some questions where I'm like, I'm not sure I understand what this means, but I'm glad that families do and that Kerri will. Full disclosure. So there was one question about that there are concerns that a child's inclusion class could be easily turned into a self-contained classroom by virtue of the breakout groups, which would be a change in placement. Will these kinds of issues be addressed in the distance learning plan?
Those kinds of issues should be addressed in the child's schedule. And that's actually, it's a great question and a great example of something that if it seems to be happening, we would want to raise a red flag. That's an example of your child's IEP is your child's IEP. If a child is supposed to be outside of Gen Ed, then they would be in a small group with other children with IEPs. If the child is inside Gen Ed, then their small group would include children who do not have IEPs. So it would be overstating it to say that the inclusion space becomes a de facto self-contained space because the child is still in the classroom with Gen Ed and there would be whole group instruction. But if there is a pattern that emerges where only children with IEPs are being pulled together and your child does not have outside gen ed hours on their IEP, then I would raise that red flag. And in the spirit of grace and patience, I might raise that red flag and say, I don't know if you've noticed this, or it seems to me that that might not be anything deliberate, but it's something that needs to be addressed, because we would not pull a child into only a special education space unless their IEP said they needed to be outside of general education. I hope that answers the question. I think, if you see anything that looks or smells a little bit fishy, ask about it. Just ask about it. It could be a mistake, it could be something unintentional, or it could be a problem. And any one of those three, we want to address it as soon as possible.
And there was another question that I had. For right now, we know that we are in a virtual space. And if and or when, my guess is as good as yours, nobody here knows, when our students return to school, will the IEP, if it were to happen like in January or in November, will the IEP process start over again for students and families, or will there be an adaptation for the digital learning piece, or how will that work?
That's a great question. The IEP process itself would not change. It would not restart any piece of the process. So there would not be any change there. The individualized distance learning plan is sort of clarifies what happens in a distance space. So let's say we will get back into brick and mortar schools this year. Fingers crossed, this is what we want for kids and families and teachers. We want to bring them back safely. We were talking, many of you, I'm sure, were part of the discussions in the summer about returning in some sort of hybrid model where we're not back in school 5 days a week all day, but back in school some days a week. In that case, the individualized distance learning plan would talk about what happens when you're at home and any changes that might be a result of, how school looks different when we're actually in school. But the IEP process itself, it would not reset any timelines. Those kinds of changes would not reset IEP timelines.
Great. That's really good to know. We have just a few minutes left, so want to give some general announcements. So, Kerri, thank you so much. You were always amazing, and I enjoy doing these with you. I think that you, as a parent, it's comforting to me to see someone with such poise and calm answer really difficult questions that often have a lot of passion behind them, and rightly so. And so I know that our kids are in good hands under your leadership. And thank you to your team as well.
Thank you so much for saying that, Taylor. And let me please also thank you for your facilitation, your skilled facilitation, and really thank parents for being here today. I know the end of day 2, we are all so tired. It's been a long 2 days, and I'm very grateful for your time and your questions and your commitment. And we welcome your feedback and hope you will join us in other parent universities over the course of this year so that we can hear from you and make this better for you and your children. Thank you.
And so as a reminder, we do have some upcoming workshops. We have on the 3rd for families, in the English Learning Family Guide to Partnering with Pre-K Teachers. And so that one is being hosted in Spanish. On the 10th, experience restorative practices with your family. On the 15th, what will attendance look like for school year 2021? And then I saw that there was a question about grading. For high school families, that answer is going to be given to you through Parent University on September 17th. And so please continue to RSVP to our workshops, continue to attend our workshops. We love having you all. You all are the reason why I enjoy doing what I'm doing. I love seeing parents with such passion, really leaning in and asking difficult questions. And so for more resources, you can find more resources at our DCPS reopenstrong.com website. That's where you can find more resources about virtual learning, learning about what other services DCPS provides. And then also, we would love to know about your experience with Parent University and this workshop. So please visit bit.ly/ParentU-eval19 for a quick survey. It would mean a lot to us to be able to get feedback so that we know how to adapt and tailor our workshops. And then for any additional questions or ideas, please email parentu@k12.dc.gov. Now, there are some questions that I would encourage you to reach out to your child's school about, but we are available. We are here to answer questions. And again, if you miss part of it and you want to see it again, please, by all means, we'll upload this workshop onto YouTube at bit.ly/ParentU reopen strong. I want to say one of my coworkers will post the definite link in the announcements. Families, again, congratulations on making it through day 2. You have proven a level of resilience that I don't think anybody thought was possible in this crazy year, and you've done it, and your kids are watching you get through this. And that in itself is a testament to the role that you play in your child's education and their future. And so thank you all. And I wish you all a great rest of the school year. And hopefully we will see you all again at one of our future Parent University workshops, specially designed to talk about special education needs. Thank you.